I'd now like to invite to the stage the distinguished participants that we have with us this evening to participate in an Energy Leaders armchair discussion. So I'll call each of your names if you can come up to the stage. I've got a few opening remarks, and then we'll get into the discussion. So Nick Nanos, Chair and CEO of Nanos Research. Kim Baird, Senior Advisor, Hill & Knowlton Strategies. Bruce Cameron, former Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Department of Energy. Louis Legault, Chair of CAMPUT, Canada's Energy and Utility Regulators. David Runnels, Board President of the Pembina Institute. And Doug Settles, the Chief Executive Officer of Encana. Now, you'll find bios for each of the participants in the back of your program. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read them out here today, but I invite you to consult them. We have a tremendous lineup of speakers. So in a way, this Energy Leaders discussion, for me, is like Back to the Future. And the reason that I say that is that when we organized the inaugural conference for positive energy, we held an armchair discussion, very similar to the one we're about to have right now. And in fact, a number of the people on this panel were participants at that inaugural conference. Bruce, Nick, David, and Canna. Now there are a few new friends that we've made along the way. Louis Legault, who's up here as well, and Kim, who's attending her first Positive Energy event. So I'm really looking forward to this session. The armchair discussion is really going to help us set the stage for the remainder of the event. This is a broad-based discussion of the issues around public confidence. In essence, what have we accomplished in Canada and at Positive Energy over the last 3 years, and what still remains to be done. The following day's sessions will get into the weeds on particular aspects of public confidence, but for now, this is a much higher level discussion. I wanted to give you, before we get started, a brief overview of accomplishments at Positive Energy. We think over the last 3 years that we've influenced things. We've been told that we've influenced things. We've been in and we've organized the right people in the right rooms, talking about the right things for the last 3 years now. I think we've contributed on the following fronts. Diagnosing the problem. Why is it that we're facing this challenge when it comes to public confidence in energy decision-making? Some of you will remember a report that Mike Cleland and I co-authored that was released about a year ago that laid out an animal metaphor of elephants, horses, and sitting ducks. That was our diagnosis of one of the reasons why we're facing some of these key challenges when it comes to public confidence. The horses in this metaphor are horses that have left the barn. Social and value change in the post-war period. We see far lower levels of trust in government, in industry, in the media. People are less deferent to decisions of public authorities. We see people want to be involved in decisions that affect them, the democratization of decision-making. And we're seeing increasingly people's line of sight focused on the individual level over the group interests. We're also seeing, as we know all too well, the rise of social media and the permanent changes that that is having on our information and communications environment. The elephants in this animal metaphor are elephants. We talk about them in the report, Mike and I, many elephants in many rooms. And what we're referring to there is policy gaps. That policy gaps on big issues like climate, like reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and cumulative effects management for the effects of multiple projects, that we've seen these spilling over into the energy decision-making processes for individual projects, all of which are ill-equipped to try to address any of those broader public policy issues on their own. And then finally, the sitting ducks. Who are the sitting ducks in this animal metaphor? Well, they're energy decision-making processes themselves. policy institutions, regulatory institutions, individual energy regulators, and the like. But we've done more than just diagnose the problem. I can recall one of the government participants in Positive Energy saying, you academics, you just fall in love with problems, but you don't actually work on solving them. Well, one of the things that we've tried to do at Positive Energy is to undertake research and engagement to actually solve these issues. What's to be done about it? Positive Energy has stressed the need for a multi-pronged approach based on what we call informed reform, with a long view in mind. And what do we mean by informed reform? Looking at not only intended consequences of reforms to energy decision-making systems, but also unintended consequences. Governments need to move on those policy gaps. We've often talked at Positive Energy about regulatory reform being a necessary but insufficient condition to strengthening public confidence in energy decision-making. But yes, regulation itself needs to be strengthened, needs to be more flexible, there needs to be more opportunities for engagement, more interaction with policymakers, all the while respecting regulatory independence. And then governments need to work on, with others, resolving stresses in energy decision-making. Who decides on energy projects, on energy policy, on regulatory development? How do we make those decisions? With what levels of engagement? With what capacity? With what actors? And how do we strengthen the relationship between policymakers and regulators? So it's clear who's deciding on what issues with what scope of authority. All of this to say that the key influence of Positive Energy over the last 3 years has really been about the recognition that the public confidence challenge is a systems challenge. We need to look at the entire energy decision-making system, not just one part. And we've been active at Positive Energy across the entire energy decision-making system. At the policy level, we've engaged directly with the Energy and Mines Ministers Conference. As the Minister just said, we've been front and center with Natural Resources Canada's Generation Energy Initiative. We've been active with provincial policymakers and in front of parliamentary committees. At the regulatory level, we've been actively engaged with the National Energy Board modernization process, with Canada's energy regulators across the country through CAMPUT, and also with individual regulators at both the federal and the provincial levels. At the project decision-making level, we've undertaken cutting-edge research with the Canada West Foundation on what drives local communities' levels of satisfaction and dissatisfaction with energy project decision-making processes. All along the way, we've fed into key reform processes, key events, and key moments, and it continued to lead a neutral, nonpartisan forum for resolution of the issues. You can see the imprints of our research and engagement across the country, and for that, we are very grateful. But we're not so naive as to think that we're the only ones who've influenced decisions, nor are we so naive as to think that all is well on the public confidence front. The latest controversy over the Trans Mountain pipeline is a case in point that we still have a long way to go on some really fundamental questions. Who decides when it comes to energy projects? Regulators? Governments? At which levels? Communities? Which communities? And how? How do we make decisions when it comes to energy projects? Through independent regulatory processes, political agreements, some combination of the two? And how do we get to decision-making arrangements that are durable? How will we know when we've got there? Positive Energy has proposed answers to these questions. You will hear about them tomorrow, and they're synthesized in the Durable Balance report that you received as you came in this afternoon. For now, though, what I'd like to do is turn to our distinguished panelists for their perspectives. Each panelist will give opening remarks of between 3 and 5 minutes, focused on their views of what has been accomplished in Canada and what remains to be done. We will then proceed to a moderated discussion and questions from the audience.